Larry Page has inspired me in many other ways too. Like when the product started getting users, I think instead of focusing on going and building a business team, marketing team, the traditional how internet businesses worked at the time, he had the contrarian insight to say, hey, search is actually going to be important. So I'm going to go and hire as many PhDs as possible. And there was this arbitrage that internet bust was happening at the time. And so a lot of PhDs who went and worked at other internet companies were available at not a great market rate. So you could spend less, get great talent like Jeff Dean, and like really focus on building core infrastructure and like deeply grounded research. And the obsession about latency, that was, you take it for granted today, but I don't think that was obvious. I even read that at the time of launch of Chrome, Larry would test Chrome intentionally on very old versions of Windows on very old laptops, and complain that the latency is bad. Obviously, the engineers could say, "Yeah, you're testing on some crappy laptop. That's why it's happening." But Larry would say, "Hey, look, it has to work on a crappy laptop so that on a good laptop it would work even with the worst internet." So that's sort of an insight. I apply it like whenever I'm on a flight. I always test Perplexity on the flight Wi-Fi
Mhm.
because flight Wi-Fi usually sucks, and I want to make sure the app is fast even on that. And I benchmark it against ChatGPT or Gemini or any of the other apps, and try to make sure that like the latency is pretty good.
It's funny. I do think it's a gigantic part of a successful software product is the latency.
Yeah,
That story is part of a lot of the great product, like Spotify. That's the story of Spotify in the early days, figure out how to stream
yeah,
music
yeah,
with very low latency.
exactly.
It's an engineering challenge, but when it's done right, like obsessively
Yeah,
reducing latency, you actually have there's like a phase shift in the user experience where you're like, holy shit, this becomes addicting, and the amount of times you're frustrated goes quickly to zero.
and every detail matters. Like on the search bar, you could make the user go to the search bar and click to start typing a query, or you could already have the cursor ready, and so that they can just start typing.
Mhm.
Every minute detail matters, and auto scroll to the bottom of the answer instead of them forcing them to scroll.
Mhm.
Or like in the mobile app, when you're clicking, when you're touching the search bar, the speed at which the keypad appears. We focus on all these details. We track all these latencies, and like that's a discipline that came to us because we really admired Google. And the final philosophy I take from Larry, I want to highlight here is there's this philosophy called the user is never wrong.
Mhm.
It's a very powerful, profound thing. It's very simple, but profound if you like truly believe in it. Like you can blame the user for not prompt engineering, right? My mom is not very good at um, English. She uses Perplexity, and she just comes and tells me the answer is not relevant. And I look at her query, and I'm like, first instinct is like, come on, you didn't type a proper sentence here. And she's like, but then I realized, okay, like, is it her fault? Like, the product should understand her intent despite that.
Mhm.
And this is a story that Larry says where, like, they just tried to sell Google to Excite, and they did a demo to the Excite CEO where they would fire Excite and Google together and same type in the same query, like university, and then in Google you would rank Stanford, Michigan, and stuff. Excite would just have like random arbitrary universities, and the Excite CEO would look at it and it's like, that's because you didn't, if you typed in this query, it would have worked on Excite too. But that's like a simple philosophy thing. Like you just flip that and say, whatever the user types, you're always supposed to give high quality answers. Then you build a product for that. You do all the magic behind the scenes so that even if the user was lazy, even if there were typos, even if the speech transcription was wrong, they still got the answer and they love the product. And that forces you to do a lot of things that are corely focused on the user. And also, this is where I believe the whole prompt engineering, like trying to be a good prompt engineer, is not going to like be a long term thing. I think you want to make products work where user doesn't even ask for something, but you know that they want it and you give it to them without them even asking for it.
Yeah, one of the things that Perplexity's clearly really good at is figuring out what I meant from a poorly constructed query.
Yeah. And I don't even need you to type in a query. You can just type in a bunch of words. It should be okay. Like that's the extent to which you got to design the product because people are lazy, and a better product should be one that allows you to be more lazy, not less. Sure, there is some like the other side of this argument is to say, if you ask people to type in clearer sentences, it forces them to think, and that's a good thing too. But at the end, like uh, products need to be having some magic to them, and the magic comes from letting you be more lazy.
Yeah, right. It's a trade off, but one of the things you could ask people to do in terms of work is the choosing the next related step in
Exactly.
their journey.
That was one of the most insightful experiments we did. After we launched, we had our designer and like co-founders were talking, and then we said, hey, like the biggest blocker to us is the biggest enemy to us is not Google. It is the fact that people are not naturally good at asking questions.
Hmm.
Like why is everyone not able to do podcasts like you? There is a skill to asking good questions, and uh, everyone's curious though. Curiosity is unbounded in this world. Every person in the world is curious, but not all of them are blessed to translate that curiosity into a well articulated question. There's a lot of human thought that goes into refining your curiosity into a question. And then there's a lot of skill into like making sure the question is well prompted enough for these AIs.
Well, I would say the sequence of questions is, as you've highlighted, really important.
Right. So help people ask the question
The first one.
and suggest them interesting questions to ask. Again, this is an idea inspired from Google. Like in Google, you get this people also ask or like suggested questions, auto suggest bar, all that. Like basically minimize the time to asking a question as much as you can, and truly predict the user intent.
It's such a tricky challenge because to me, as we're discussing, the related questions might be primary. So like you might move them up earlier. You know
Sure.
what I mean? And that's such a difficult design decision.
Yeah.
And then there's like little design decisions. Like for me, I'm a keyboard guy, so
Hmm.
the control I to open a new thread, which is what I use,
Yeah.
it speeds me up a lot. But
Hmm.
the decision to show the shortcut
Hmm.
in the main Perplexity interface on the desktop
Yeah.
is pretty gutsy. That's a very that's probably, as you get bigger and bigger, there'll be a debate.
Yeah.
But I like it.
Yeah.
But then there's like different groups of humans.
Exactly. I mean, some people. I've talked to Karpati about this, and he uses our product. He hates the sidekick, the side panel. He just
Yes.
wants to be auto hidden all the time, and I think that's good feedback too because there's like the mind hates clutter.
Mhm.
Like when you go into someone's house, you want it to be. You always love it when it's like well maintained and clean and minimal. Like there's this whole photo of Steve Jobs, like in his house where it's just like a lamp and him sitting on the floor. I always had that vision when designing Perplexity to be as minimal as possible. Google was also the original Google was designed like that. Uh, there's just literally the logo and the search bar and nothing else.
I mean, there's pros and cons to that. I would say in the early days of using a product, there's a kind of anxiety when it's too simple
Hmm.
because you feel like you don't know the full set of features. You don't know what to do.
Right.
It almost seems too simple. Like, is it just as simple as this? So there's a comfort initially to the sidebar, for example.
Correct.
But again, Karpathy, probably me aspiring to be a power user of things. So I do want to remove the side panel and
Yeah.
everything else and just keep it simple.
Yeah.
But
That's the hard part. Like when you're growing, when you're trying to grow the user base, but also retain your existing users, making sure you're not. How do you balance the trade offs? Um, there's an interesting case study of this Notes app, and they just kept on building features for their power users. And then what ended up happening is the new users just couldn't understand the product at all. And there's a whole talk by a early Facebook data science person who was in charge of their growth that said the more features they shipped for the new user than the existing user, they felt like that was more critical to their growth. And there are like you can just debate all day about this, and this is why like product design and like growth is not easy.